This article is inspired by what is perhaps the most overt European intervention in Africa since the end of the Cold War. It takes the form of billions of euros, technical and military assistance, and institutional reforms aimed at controlling what many Europeans see as a dual, inseparable threat. The first is that posed by African migrants coming to Europe, threatening its economy, society, and politics. Perhaps more importantly, they fear that African migrants' presence offers fodder to the racial rhetoric and electoral success of right-wing political parties, parties that threaten Europe's democratic foundations. Essentially, this paper outlines the effects of Europe's efforts to save its liberal order through externalized, deeply undemocratic, and racially infused interventions in Africa. It describes the emergence of a chronotope of containment development. What is this? Well, it's a narrative construction jointly authored by African and European political elites, although undoubtedly framed by Europe, that effectively excludes Africa and Africans from global space-time. At its heart is a break from colonial and developmentalist thinking, which positions Africa and its residents on a universal developmental continuum. This is not to celebrate the colonial project, but merely to recognize that underlying it and justifying it was an effort to bring Africa into global circulations of trade, politics, and culture. This is something that we see today with the SDGs. However, the current chronotope reflects a break from this. Developmentalism becomes disconnection, a disconnection enforced through outright coercion and a recalibration of developmental success, in which progress means people do not move. The work draws promiscuously from varied fields and debates. Most obviously, it furthers discussions of reterritorialization spawned by externalized immigration control. It goes further than most, however, by understanding how these processes are reshaping development, knowledge production, and the making of self. This takes us further along the spatial turn in the social sciences, complementing questions of space with new approaches to studying transforming temporalities driven by more than rampant capitalism. Against almost all economic interests, Europe now seeks to cut off a needed labor supply and fragment African exchange into scores of micro-markets. In doing so, they naturalize violence against those crossing borders, not only those entering a foreign state, but those who might seek to leave. Using the term chronotope draws us away from material forces to the linguistic and conceptual foundations of global politics and circulation. Following Bakhtin, it asks us to read how authors, in this case European and African political elites, imagine time and space and the people occupying them. This reveals a vision of spatialized futures that fundamentally work against the logics of global capitalism, modernism, and developmentalism. It is a racially infused logic designed to counter demands for hospitality and entanglement. It gives rise to a way of reading African progress as staying still. Already this chronotope is framing interventions across Africa and the Middle East. What this means for millions of Africans and their relationship to the world remains to be seen and is something that demands our attention. Ironically, while African migration has had little global profile, this is something we will now begin to see, thanks to dozens of new initiatives involving census offices, NGOs, and university research centers. We'll be learning more about African migration than ever before. But this is a knowledge with a purpose: to regulate, to promote sedentarization, and to naturalize the desire to stay fixed in place and out of global time. Indeed, to naturalize these efforts, Europe is sponsoring dozens of programs aimed at localizing Africans' future imagination. Through education and advocacy, Africans are being told that migration is a betrayal of nation and family. Of course, for those who still wish to move, an assemblage of surveillance and violence will aim to keep them in place. Although my work focuses on Africa and its relationship to Europe and to global time, its implications go beyond this. There are obvious parallels to U.S. externalization strategies in Central America or Australia's actions in the Pacific. These are spaces in which strategies operate, and the languages used to justify them are fragmenting globalism. This is not only about trade, but about rights and what it means to be human. Recognizing these emerging chronotopes provides fertile space for both research and advocacy. For the authors and audiences of the chronotopes, a language of universal rights and progress becomes unintelligible. These too demand a new script and novel strategies of engagement from those seeking to counter containment and continental dehumanization. Containment is ongoing. It is part of an active and well-resourced strategy of control. I look forward to collaboration and conversations that can help make sense of this dangerous chronotope and identify ways to reinscribe the freedoms needed for people to be fully human. You can find me on Twitter, send me an email, or look for me on the web.